Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of The Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Today, I'm honored to welcome Diane Szukovathy to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. Diane's journey into flower farming began with a simple packet of zinnia seeds gifted to her as a child. And over the years, that small spark grew into a flourishing career in the floral industry. Alongside her husband, Dennis Westfall, Diane co-founded Jello Mold Farm, a stunning 7-acre flower farm in Washington's Skagit Valley. Since starting from scratch 2 decades ago, they have built a reputation for growing pristine quality flowers and foliage while working in harmony with nature. Their farm is certified Salmon-Safe and supplies over 80 different floral crops to some of the Puget Sound's area's top floral designers. But Diane's influence extends far beyond her own farm. As a founding member of the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, she played a key role in creating this farmer-owned cooperative, which connects local growers with florists and designers looking for seasonal, high-quality blooms. The co-op has reshaped the way floral professionals source their flowers, emphasizing sustainability and supporting small-scale American growers. Now, Diane and her fellow growers have taken their collective expertise a step further with their new book, Floral Standards, a practical guide for harvesting and delivering professional quality products. This essential resource offers best practices for harvesting and handling 230 floral crops, ensuring that both flower farmers and home gardeners can achieve optimal vase life and quality. In today's conversation, we're going to dive into Floral Standards, the evolution of Jello Mold Farm, and the story behind the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, along with Diane's insights on growing and selling top-quality flowers. Whether you're a backyard gardener, a flower farmer, or simply passionate about sustainable floriculture, this episode is packed with valuable knowledge. So, without further ado, Diane, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor. I'm so excited to talk to you. You have so many facets of your journey in the floral industry, from starting your own flower farm to co-founding the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market to writing a book. So we're going to take it back for a moment. You mentioned to me offline that your love for flowers started with a packet of zinnia seeds from your great aunt. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, it's such a cool story. I've never told this story before.
Oh.
But I grew up on a wild-ranging piece of land in eastern Washington in the Methow Valley. And my parents were not farmers. But they liked to be in the mountains and in open space. And we had a fairly wild vegetable garden. My mom was very practical. She was sort of in charge of the vegetable garden. But there were never any flowers anywhere. And there were a lot of wildflowers on the property, and I knew all of them as personal friends. Somehow had a connection to flowers I was born with. But my great aunt, well, it turns out my mom's family was actually farmers, just skipped her generation. But they were homesteaders in the Happy Valley, Oregon.
Oh,
and
not far from me.
Yeah, so I've got this farming gene in my blood, and my great aunt Annette grew up on that, was born on that homestead, and she actually I have her personal recollections of taking horse and buggy rides on corduroy roads on that property, which is so interesting, like the bump because the logs are laid sideways. She became a school teacher and never married. And she was probably in her 80s when I was about 8 years old. And she lived a long way away, but she would correspond with us. So she sent seed packets in the mail. And I got the packet that said zinnia seeds. And so I got to learn how to grow flowers by just planting these seeds. That's how I knew what a zinnia was when it grew up and bloomed amongst the weeds of my mother's garden.
Oh my goodness.
And it was said, I cannot explain. I cannot put words around the sheer magic of having that happen. I don't think Christmas really warrants that much attention compared to getting this little seed, planting it, and having that happen as a kid. So yeah, that's my story of domestic flower farming origins. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I feel so special that we got to hear about that story first hand.
It's just so important that we share about flowers. We flower people and botanically oriented people have to remember that it's magic for others too, and to share that.
Yes. Well, that is exactly why I created this podcast, is to share these stories. So I'm so excited to dive into your story, but I want to take a moment to acknowledge that packet of zinnia seeds when you were 8 years old. I think it just goes to show that such a small act or gesture can have such a lasting impact on someone's life. We never know what that one flower or that one seed is going to do, or how that seed that you sowed literally grew into something so much bigger. But I imagine that when you were 8 years old, you didn't know you were going to become a flower farmer.
No.
So what was the moment that you realized that you wanted to turn your passion for flowers into a business?
So I had a landscaping business before Dennis and I purchased land and started the farm. And I started that in the early 90s. And this is another funny story, but I don't want to take too much time, so I'll go quickly with it because it's a questions. But I was an artist. I was a painter, and that's what I studied in college. The creative being to my core. And I had a studio. I was in my late 20s, living in Seattle when you could still live in Seattle for $10,000 a year.
Oh my gosh!
I know. Can you imagine? Anyway, it was great for being creative because you could find yourself that way. And I had a series of kind of, like packing jobs and whatnots. And it was in a packing warehouse, and there was a window, and then there was another building right next door with a little dingy alley, and then there was a row of moss on this window ledge of the building next door. And I just kept staring compulsively at that little row of green across there through the Seattle rain, going, I gotta get outside. So then one day I just started a landscaping business. I just did it. I just took a leap.
Wow.
And, started with $1,000 microloan and bought a few tools and just started raking yards and built it from there. And then that was what I built quite a lot of botanical knowledge by just studying and taking classes and here and there. And that's what was the kind of foundation for starting the farm. So we just wanted to not live in the city anymore. And so we just bought a piece of land and said, what are we going to do with this? So anyway, I don't want to go too deep because I could spend 4 hours on this podcast, and I want to make sure I answer your questions. So.
Okay. Well, we can let it unfold organically too. I know we're definitely wanting to touch on the Seattle Wholesale Growers and your new book, but I think that your story really helps to shape who someone is and why it leads to other things. So I find this so fascinating. So you bought this piece of land and you just said, I'm going to start a flower farm and I'm going to call it Jello Mold.
Well, originally we just wanted to make a living off the land, and we were going to grow do a little truck farm at the flowers, a bit more food oriented.
Okay.
We planted a big old orchard, and slowly over a few years, but 80 trees or something. We went and volunteered at the farmers market with some friends who were doing that, and we realized we were no way going to pay a mortgage that way. And I had all this botanical knowledge, and it kind of just merged into a oh my God, I can't stop figuring out what you can cut. And we might as well grow flowers. And so it sort of happened organically. Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of a slippery slope. So in those early years, I imagine there were a lot of lessons you learned about, you just mentioned what flowers can you cut. I'm sure there were a lot of lessons to learn.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, there were so many because, I joined the ASCFG. That was a really good move because then I could meet other flower farmers and get a vision of what's possible. And so it evolved over some years. We just kept on landscaping to pay as we started to plant the farm. And of course, we started like everyone does with the annual crops because that's what you can bring to market that year. So
totally.
We also started putting in more of more woody crops, and because I always had such an interest in it. I just love trees and shrubs and always have. So, and from my gardening days, I just was translating that information over to, let's put 40 or 80 of those in a row, like instead of one in a garden, So, and learned a lot that way. Early on, I called it like shooting the shotgun, where you like just you do a little research and then you try like 20 things and 2 of them stick, and you call it tuition for the rest and expand on the ones that did, and just kind of doing that over a number of years helped us kind of establish our niche.
I always look at those, I'm doing quotation marks with my fingers, those almost failures, as those are our best learning lessons that make us better at our craft of growing flowers.
It's also what makes it really fun for farmers to go into conferences and meet up with other farmers, because those stories they'll take you all night.
Yes, absolutely.
They're like fishing stories.
Yes. My daughter, just last night, I went to visit another farmer. We have a barren piece of land, which I won't spend too much time on it, but we've got about 20 acres that we are now cultivating that we just purchased this last year. And a fellow flower farmer in our area gave me a ton of willow cuttings, and I'm talking about huge ones. And of course, I told my daughter, it's only going to be a few minutes. And she goes, yeah, right, Mom. And 45 minutes later, my daughter's like, we've got to get out of here. And we're swapping our winter stories. And it's just flower people are the best. You can just talk forever. So I'll try not to get off on too many tangents today.
Problem for us, right?
Yes. It's always like meeting an old friend. Every time you see that flower, every time you see that flower grower, it just feels like you're connecting. It's such a connection. I do want to ask you a few more questions about your farm before we jump into the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market. Your farm is known for its pristine quality and sustainable practices. Can you share some of your key growing philosophies and methods that you believe set your farm apart?
Well, yes, I think it sets my farm together with other people who think the same way.
Yes.
So put it that way, because I really always see myself as part of a quilt or a community. And
I love that.
I get resonant energy from that passion for treating the plant world well, working as hard as possible to make sure that our footprint on the land isn't too heavy. We can't really be perfect in this world. We live in a world of plastic and it's hard to get around it, but you can at least stay conscious and do your best at every turn and learn from others. But at the heart of it, the philosophy is one of land stewardship, of caring about this planet and really wanting to use our daily lives as what would be the right word? Like just an example, like trying by example to see whether we can live some way besides the dollar destroying the planet.
Yes.
We are in business, but there must be other ways where it can be more in harmony with nature, and everything goes down to that. And I know you were going to ask me about the sort of Salmon-Safe certification, which we've had for a long time. We've looked at certifying organic, and we do all the practices of organics. The certification it takes a lot of paperwork, and it is, in my opinion, more designed for food, in that the customers there aren't enough customers looking specifically for certified organic. It's a great program, but it's much more tailored to food from my experience. And so the Salmon-Safe program was interesting to us because, if we were selling directly to our customer, like a florist or whatever, they can come to our farm and see what we're doing, and we don't really need a certification. But once we started the co-op and our customers don't really know us personally, all of them, or haven't been to our farm, then it's really important to have a third-party certifier say, we've been to your farm and you are adhering to these standards. And Salmon-Safe, I really like the program. It's more, they do food, wine, beer, and flowers. That's kind of been their focus. And what I like about the program is it's so smart, because it's like, okay, because of gravity on this planet, water ends up back in the sea, and it ends up, everything you do does really, even if you're not next to a body of water, does affect fish. Yes. And it's a cool measure. And what I like about the program is it measures a lot of things that the organics program doesn't, like wildlife habitat, diversity for pollinators, erosion control, just what's your runoff doing. It does looking at a lot of like your whole farm practices in a way that, frankly, I love the program because I've learned so much from them. Like I just had a recertification with a new person came out. Their people stay with them for a long time. So I just met a new certifier. These folks have been to school for ecology, ecological farming, and it's just like, look, you've got a lot of canary reed grass over here in this area. I'd really appreciate if you might want to plant some some tree stakes in here and get some shade on that stuff and help eliminate that. And I was like, well, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. And thanks for sending me the information on how to do that. So it's a reciprocal sort of situation, very educational. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I kind of went down a rabbit hole reading about it this morning before our call because our new farm, we are on a gentle slope and it feeds into the Hood River, which is a major salmon run. And so everything that runs down the mountain from our property runs straight into the Hood River, which directly impacts the salmon.
Yeah.
So.
And there's things you can do. I mean, it's like they're so good about it, but there's things you can do. Like you can just plant a barrier, get some shade on, if you're right over a creek or whatever, but just also like watch what you're doing with your animals, it's just a matter of knowledge. It's pretty easy on our scale to adhere to decent practices. Just need to know what they are.
I love that you said they came out and gave you thoughtful suggestions of things you could do to improve, because I think that's such a great partnership. We spent this last weekend on our farm pulling styrofoam out of our creek because it runs directly into the river. And for many, many years, our farm, it appears, was a huge dumping site where all garbage was buried literally on the creek. And so, I mean, my husband spent all day Saturday filling trash bags of it, and all of a sudden the water's running clear. But
well, that's going to be more and more, I think, what happens to the new farmers who come into land is that you're going to have to clean up somebody else's mess. And, it's beautiful work. And thank you for doing it. And it's work that we all need to do in service to this planet that sustains us. And I don't want to get preachy, but I just really think it's important.
I agree. Yes, we definitely feel like stewards of this land, and it just breaks our heart to see what's been done in the past, but we know that there's a better way. So I really love that you are certified Salmon-Safe. It's something I'd never even heard of until I went to your website. And so I wanted to highlight that because I'm sure there's many other farmers that could also get involved with that as well. I just think that's such a great opportunity. Let's kind of transition over to the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market and the flower farming community if we can. So you started your farm over 20 years ago and you're still farming on your farm. Is that correct?
Yeah. Making a living at it. Yeah.
Awesome. And you co-founded the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was chair of the board for the first 11 years or so. And but it was definitely a joint effort by a bunch of different farmers from Washington and Oregon.
What inspired the idea to create the Wholesale Growers Market?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was a need. I think there were new farmers who, into the trade like you are now, who were like, I don't know how to make money. I know how to grow it, but I don't know how to get it sold. It doesn't seem very easy. And what we didn't know at the time was that that the Andean Free Trade Act had gone into effect in the early 90s and had really moved a lot of the floral production overseas to the equatorial Americas, and just so there wasn't nearly the opportunity, and a lot of people who had been there for a while had gone out of business, and so we had gotten together at an ASCFG meeting with Oregon and Washington growers, and so it was this thing where, well, there's this great market in Portland, but there's nothing like that in Seattle. And so unfortunately, I'm a real doer, that's a kind of a good farmer trait, but it can get you in trouble. And it was just like, I was the regional director at ASCFG Northwest at that time. And so I just said, well, let's have a roundtable discussion. And that it just was born in a roundtable discussion at Charles Little and Company in Eugene. And then it was an idea in the summer of 2010. By the fall, we were talking seriously about it. By February of the following year, we had incorporated with the Secretary of State of Washington, and we're a cooperative. And we opened our doors in April of that year. So we just kind of the farmer style made it happen and learned as we went. And probably made many, many mistakes that we could have studied a while and not made. But maybe it was the only way it would have happened. Because if we really looked at what we were doing, I don't think we would have seen it as viable. There's a wonderful publication that I'll go ahead and link you to if you don't already have it. It's a case study that Margaret Lunn did on our cooperative. So that
I'd love to see it.
That would also help for anybody who's super interested in that particular topic can reference that. So I'll make a note to get that reference to you.
Awesome. And then I can include that in the show notes so that our listeners can also read about it. I would love to know, how did you make the growers market a reality? I mean, I know you guys all decided to do it, but what were the steps you took to make it a reality?
Well, we had to come out and find some money somehow. So we just sort of happened upon some entomologists over here at the research station in Mount Vernon who had a grant that they'd written that wasn't working out quite how they wanted it to. It was supposed to be for the cut flower trade, but the sector of people they were trying to serve weren't really interested in getting the services they had written the grant for. And so they were trying to figure out a way to kind of crab walk over to where they could help the industry and do what they needed to do to get their work paid. And so we kind of set up a deal with them where we held the cut flower growers school. I was really interested in doing it already and brought in some expertise and did a 2-day school. I think the tuition was $150, which is awesome.
Wow.
School. Yeah. We were grant funded, but we were also like really just interested in learning ourselves and getting the information out there. So that would have been probably what I would say would be since we seem to have a theme here of talking about the source point of these bigger things that came out. I would say that was the source point of our book, was holding those grower schools. And then some of us farmers who were founders got together and were teachers there, as well as, bringing in other expertise from other areas. And then we were able to keep the tuition. We didn't get to use the grant funding directly, but we keep the tuition. That's how we raised our money to get our bylaws written with a cooperative attorney. And then we had to search for a place because originally we thought, well, we'll just circle the wagons in a parking lot and sell that way on certain days of the week or whatever. And, there's a lot of collective energy going on right now. I see that it's a big resonant topic amongst the next generation of flower farmers. I think is wonderful. And we were right there. We were having those same thoughts and we were like, okay, how can we do this and make it work? And ultimately, the Oregon growers who had to drive 5 hours and more said, hey, we can't just drive up there for a parking lot. We have to have somewhere with a cooler where we can put our products. And so found a space in Georgetown and Seattle, South Seattle, and bid into a lease and took off from there. It's quite a long story. So but it could have, many people came and went out of those original. It was kind of like quicksand a little bit. People figuring out what is this business, and what my role there as kind of the core leader for those first decade or so was just to keep the baby alive and see how can we, because people were figuring out whether it was, were they, what would their philosophy align with what we were doing? What, there's a lot going on there in the formative time. And it was just like, okay, let's just see if we can hold this space where the majority can exist and then figure ourselves out. So that's sort of the beginnings. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, because like you said, there's so many newer flower farmers. I mean, I started my flower farming journey 7 years ago, and I think there was a handful of flower growers in my region where I'm in the Columbia River Gorge. And I think we last counted, there's over 25 growers now. So, I mean, we've grown substantially. And I think there's a lot of curiosity in different regions about how did the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market become so successful? And I know that to become successful, it often takes a few trial and errors. But one thing I love that you said is that you guys didn't really have everything figured out, but you guys just kind of kept taking a step and then the next step until you figured it out, it sounds like.
Well, that, and I mean, I do believe, like, I just really want to, I think it's like it's such a challenge to try and harness all that great creative and plain old work ethic energy. Like not all those flower farmers will stick at the long haul, but a number of them will. And how is it that we can organize enough that this product can flow in and not just be battling itself? Like how can we collaborate to sell? And I just think that's a big question that is, youth has the energy to answer it, but I certainly also think it's important not to just reinvent the wheel over and over again. That's so it seems to have happened in our industry, where people guard their knowledge. And that's part of why we created this book. It's like, we don't want that. We're all going to die anyway. Let's make sure that the next generation doesn't have to start from the same place we did. And, so that ability to sell together, because of course we have the market, the consumers are trained that they go in the grocery store and they grab their flowers, or they go to, like everything's like automatic and perfect and standardized. And, that's how the world runs. And so how do you as a little farmer, like, get enough market to be able to make a living? Or, people love the idea of the farm, but, how do you make enough money to be able to stay on it? It's like sad, because I think most of us are motivated by, can I just live here and do this? And I don't mind the work. And most people I know are fantastic growers. It's the marketing that's the hard part. And I think it's just so important to not borrow too much from the competitive model and see, well, you have to differentiate yourself. And it's not that a little healthy competition isn't a bad idea. It helps you have quality, but it's also such an important thing to think, well, how can we work together? Because then everybody wins. And more than anything, I think it's actually good science. I think that the consumer then perceives that the industry is like vibrant and they want to buy from it. So I think the nation of Holland is a good example of that.
Yes. Well, one thing that I see that's so great about a growers collective is that it allows us to better compete with the imports, because myself, I have a 20-acre farm. I'm only going to cultivate about an acre this year. I still can't grow enough to compete with the larger imports. I mean, I can never supply the same quantity, but if I combine forces with my fellow growers in the area, we could supply a florist with their needs for the week. So I think that together we become a stronger collective if we can all deliver the same quality of product.
Yeah. And I would say with the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, it was that Oregon-Washington convening, which made us have to get bigger than we ever imagined we'd have to be just to exist. So once we had a lease, we had to keep paying that lease. And then we got a grant to have a manager. And so it sort of changed our business model. We needed to be bigger, and so now we've got a walk-in shoppable cooler, and we have a staff of 10 people, and we have, or approximately 10 is seasonal a little bit, and then we have, like that staff works, and we are open year round with regular business hours. And that changes everything because we're also seasonal here in the Northwest. And it's like, just the next, if you think of concentric circles of local, it's like, okay, well then that's a very different model than the imports. And so you can almost think of it as a different product and a different, but you can't each little individual can't market it. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have the presence and a farm stand and a beautiful website and all of that, but really to get some power behind the moving product. That's where like keeping the good part of our diversified and seasonal crops, but standardizing the way we grow them so that the customer learns that they can get the same thing from different farms at different times, and so then they start to work it into their design work and understanding. There's so much teaching that needs to be done. I mean, it's also the great part. It's why we're all in it, right? It's like this. It's like so many different things we can grow, right, and cut.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a quote comes to my mind, and I don't know who said it, but it's a rising tide am I saying that right? A rising tide rises all boats.
Yeah. That's very apt. Yes, I think.
And so I think of it the same way in the flower industry. If we can help everyone become better growers, it just strengthens the sustainability of the local flower market for all of us.
Yeah, I agree.
I imagine that there were some challenges getting started. Looking back, what were one or two of the biggest challenges you guys faced launching? Oh, that's a loaded question, I know.
It'll just be random for me because my brain is like a flywheel and it'll just turn up whatever it turns up at that moment. So how about rats eating the amaranth and grass products in our coolers down at the
oh my gosh,
first rented, and the landlord deciding that they're going to put a paid parking lot where our customers park and then ticketing them. That was a bit of and then having to relocate ourselves into a space that was way too big for ourselves in 2017. And thinking, we'll sublet the extra space, and not realizing that Seattle had become so expensive to live and start a business in that nobody wanted a 5,000 square foot sublease, because if they're going to be a startup, they're going to be somewhere besides Seattle. And so having to eat that lease long enough that that's why we negotiated that deal with Maesh to be next door. Is like, oh my goodness, how are we going to survive this? So, it's like always like that thing of that lean, mean survival instinct, right? Is like, okay, well, we're in a pickle. How do we get out of this pickle? What are our options? And how creatively can we think to do it? So there is a nice little, I think that's a couple examples.
Yeah.
But it was constant like that. Yeah. Yeah. The other one, actually, I would give you one more. That is just simply that consistently through time, fear has been the thing our own fears have been the thing that would stop us. I saw it many, many times, and I personally would have engaged in, I call it fear dance, a little fight, a little, but that's all those kerfluffles, those personal issues, whatever. I had tremendous personal growth by learning that you just can't afford that fight, so don't have it. And learning that that's a choice and that the job is to keep the baby alive was really good for me, and also really good, I think, probably for your listeners, because anybody who's trying to form a collective will know that it's just like grounding the core is such an important piece of keeping. Like, you could figure out probably anything mechanical and even the hugest of obstacles if you can keep a calm in the core.
That's such great advice. I think that our self-doubt can stop us from so many things. I read a book last year called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And it was a game changer of settling my mind, because I would always go to worst case scenario. It's like, what if this happens, or what if this happens? It's like, that's just a thought.
Well, and there's one other piece of this, which is about confidence, right? This industry, has all different kinds of people in it, but it is, for agriculture, it's the one sector that's more women than men.
Yes.
In the U.S. anyway. And it's like, there's a lot of female energy in our, even feminine energy, I should say, which everyone has that. But that's a lot of, but it's badass too, because we're producing and we're farming and we're, gritty. But it's still a lot of women business owners. And we have our own issues with confidence because of how we've been enculturated. So I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to realize how dang smart and capable we are, and to, a growth opportunity. Yeah.
I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. As the local flower movement grows and we see more and more flower farmers coming into the industry, do you think that we'll see more farmer-led cooperatives like this in other regions of the country?
I sincerely hope so. And what I'd like to see is more cooperation between cooperatives, if that can happen. It's a bit of a vision down the road. It's not there now. But I can already see, even within our membership in the co-op, we go from the Canadian border. We're in Western Washington. Oregon is where our members happen to be. From the Canadian border down to about central West Oregon. And just the differences in microclimates and times of, like, for instance, lilac will come out at very distinctly different times all the way down there. So instead of having 3 weeks of lilac, you'll have 6 or 8 weeks of lilac, that kind of thing. I believe we could do regional alliances and move product back and forth. And it could be a really wonderful way of getting more people engaged. I know for our co-op, I certainly envision, because, we have a big, like a 28-foot refrigerated box truck and a large shoppable walk-in cooler at the market, and a lot of other, things that help our business run. Those are expensive. Our lease is expensive. And so we have an overhead that we need to move a certain amount of product through. And it just seems to me like we're not maximizing that overhead yet. And how it would work really well if there were others who could interface with us. I could see that being really bright, because like right now our co-op brings in like product from California, or product from Hawaii, product from British Columbia to supplement, especially for the months when our growers don't have it. And I also see the problem of there's a lot of flower farmers around us who are not part of the market. I mean, we probably sell the products of 60 farms in there. That's an out of the air guess. We have 19 members who own the co-op. We would certainly love to engage with and have a bigger membership, but it's like the opportunities. You don't want to displace a grower just to bring another grower in, and so there's a science to it. And right now, this is just my personal thought. It's not necessarily what the co-op is going to do or the board will decide to do, but I just see us having an ability to do more like regional, like get more of our product out of our region also, in a way that's thoughtful and thinking about concentric circles. So sell it as close to home as possible as the model. Just some thoughts. So yeah, I do see possibilities, but it takes so much organization. And I think sometimes the smaller collectives need to think about who's going to do all those things that gets the product distributed and how are they going to get paid. That's a huge obstacle. And sometimes we did get USDA funding for our co-op, several different grants early on. We don't have any now, but they certainly did help us to become big enough to tackle some of those problems, but we're still unfolding ourselves, and it's still a challenge.
I love that idea of having more cooperatives that can share product and collaborate, like you just said. I think that would be amazing for the local flower movement. What advice would you give to growers who want to start something similar in their own communities?
Oh my. Well, I would say that case study of the co-op would be a great just to get our story read. And I would say that this co-op had this extremely committed core to it from the beginning, about just a handful of people. Actually, some of them never even served on the board. They are just amazing suppliers who are just there and solid. But there's a handful that are just anchoring that business for us. And I think you need that. You need a level of commitment in the core. Not everybody has to be there. People have lots of different reasons why they might weave in and out in a different way. But if your core has got to be committed, almost like parenthood. That kind of level of, hey, like I remember early on, I would say, folks, I mean, there were many times when we were probably going to go out of business and people were really scared about it. And I just say, hey, it's not going to explode. If it needs to go out of business, we will take the steps. I will be there the whole time. And we will just calmly do the things we need to do if we have to shut this business. And I will be the last one to leave the room, and I will turn off the lights. And that just calms people. It's like, okay, hang on. It's not this wild beast. Well, maybe it is. We could talk about that, but it's an ongoing project, a shared project. And I think you also have to be committed to embracing the lessons that you personally will learn. I've had got so much personal growth out of some of the harder times, especially working with people and learning how to be a better cooperator. And it's humbling and also a huge opportunity.
That is great advice for others wanting to start a similar co-op. I think there's so much opportunity and so much interest in this right now. So I look forward to reading your case study. I know that through this co-op, through the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, a group of you got together and decided that we needed some floral standards. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it actually started before COVID. It actually started that I brought the seeds of that idea. I mean, we all saw the need, but I had already seen it on my farm. Just trying to, you have a lot of turnover on a seasonal farm, and trying to train our employees on, well, there's 10 stems in this bunch, and here's the harvest age on that. I'd started with a recipe card box that just was divided into annuals, perennials, woodies, and it just so that people could find that what it was, because we would forget from year to year what's the stem length on the Coralopsis, or like that kind of thing. Because our crops are seasonal, and so that started, and then during COVID, right around then, we had gotten a grant from the USDA, the same grant that funded the case study that we'll include with this with your support materials, and it funded us we decided we would take and build a series. We had money to do this. We had to build a series of, we called them spec sheets. They were a series of PDFs on all the main products in the market, so that because it was such a challenge to get the growers to send, like, even if it's the same number of stems, like it would be like girth and height. There's just so much to quality, stage of harvest, and then so many different crops. And so we built a series of spec sheets and a kind of a master best practices sheet. And John Dole, Professor John Dole from North Carolina State University in Raleigh, I want to make sure I quote the right college there. But he's kind of one of the top experts in the nation on specialty cut flower post-harvest care, and he harvest and post-harvest. And he vetted all of our sheets for us as part of was funded through the grant, which was fantastic, because then we had not only our own learned experience, which was some very experienced farmers, but still we're farmers, not scientists. And then we had him reading through, proofing, and giving us information, so that gave us a kind of a credibility within. We just used those sheets within the co-op. And then a couple of years ago, we were in a board retreat in the fall. Fall is when you get in trouble, farmers. That's when you have time to bite off something nice and large and chew on it until spring comes, and you go, what the hell was I thinking? But one of our board members suggested that we ought to publish those sheets into a book, because they were highly useful to people outside of the co-op as well. And that was fall of 2023, and come fall of 2024, we had a book, sort of like a story of the co-op. And the co-op paid me some money to spearhead the project and to, take it from those sheets into something more developed. Our manager, Brad Seeby, is very botanically knowledgeable, and helped us add some chapters, and also helped us to discern, kind of working in a team, we discerned which are the products that should be in here and which ones are so esoteric we probably don't need to put them in. And, kind of finding that line. And I know like conifers was one of the ones, there's just a big blurry wasteland. There's just no information out there. And people bring, we had really cool conifers coming into the market. It would just happen to be some grower had access to a nursery and they could harvest all this really cool golden foliaged whatevers. And, you're like, wow, that's real cool. What is that thing? Never knew they made white pines that were that shape or whatever like that. And so taking that, drilling it into an actual like data that's captured and accessible in an organized way was the challenge, like wrestling a big beast. Because, together in that co-op, I know we were trying at some point right in that COVID time period to create unique line items for all the crops that sell through the co-op. We don't have barcodes because, that's another whole nother step, but it was over 7,000 when we cataloged it.
Wow.
Unique items between farm and item. It's just crazy how much, you take that diversity, everyone's botanical curiosity and cube it, and you've got quite a, you've got quite an inventory list. So that was the confusion of all that chaos and the fact that, AI will make that a simple thing eventually, I'm sure. But for us, for our feeble human brains, we needed some way of organizing ourselves and then communicating to new growers coming in as well as our existing growers what was acceptable for a quality standard. Because, and this is the key to it all, is that when you have a shared brand in a collective or a cooperative, your customers shop from the co-op. They don't shop from, they know, and we, in our market, we have signage and our customers do know what farms their products come from or can find out if they want to. That's something that a part of our brand is that origin is important. That's what local is, it's not greenwashed if you know exactly what farm it comes from and where. And so, but at the same time, the customer is buying from the co-op. And if they buy something crappy, or they see that, this bunch, there's a picture in the book of 2 bunches of snapdragons. And one of them is like, it'll give you an improved bicep. And the other one is like, what is that wimpy little thing? And they're like both 10 stems and they're both being sold at the same price point. And it's not that one is even better value than the other. It's just that they're not the same. They're not the same. And so trying to find a language where we can have our customers still have that wonderful experience of lots of selection, which is what the other kind of wholesalers don't give because it's so commodified. At the same time, enough standardization that our creative people, we call it like an art supply store. Our creative people, a perishable art supply store. Our creative people can make sense of it and use and feel like they're having a quality professional experience when they buy from us.
I can't believe that there were 7,000 different line items. Ultimately, the book now covers 230 floral crops. Is that correct?
Yeah. And to be clear, it's like 20 farms times snapdragon. You know what I mean? So not that many. There are quite a few products that are not in the book that sometimes show up in the market, but the book really does capture the heart of it. Probably 95% or more of what sells through the market is standardized into that book. Yeah.
Okay.
So 230 crops but like for instance, the grasses section has there's a chart in there and it's 20 kinds of grasses and that's just for annual grasses or 15 or what like that. So it's like there's a lot more than 230 actual crops in there. It's pretty detailed because fact is that the detail is where the knowledge is. That's where the actual information that's useful is in that granular detail.
I think that's so great. One of the key focuses in this book is on harvest timing. Can you explain for those that are listening today who are newer to harvesting cut flowers, why is proper harvest timing so critical for vase life and quality?
That's such a great question because and it's different for every single crop. Some crops, like foliage crops and things are not so critical, but certain flowers, they're just it's the reason we're in love with the plant world is it's so incredibly diverse and full of surprises. And, basically, if you go back to evolution, it's just a multitude of ways of solving a problem. And each plant figures that out differently. And then we as humans come along and want to use the plants for a particular use for cut flowers. And then the plants will respond differently based on their characteristics. And knowing those plants is essential. So if we take the topic of dahlias, because a lot of people starting out are growing dahlias, and this is stuff we learned on the way that is just so interesting. So, you hear rumors like, oh, you don't cut your dahlias won't open more if you cut them; they'll stay right at that stage. And then people, well, no, no, no. The BC growers sell these certain white dahlias, and they're super tight and they do open. And like you just kind of get this information. You go, what? Look in both directions, going, what? So what we did a lot of vase trialing for the information that's in the book. And John Dole did help us set up our trialing. We did it here on our farm because we have in our barn, we have an insulated prep room that we can keep it within. We just experimented, and we can keep our temperatures there, whether it's cold or warm. We can, between a space heater and a little swamp cooler, we can keep it within 2 degrees one way or another of room 68 degrees Fahrenheit, so room temperature. So we have a standard. We can set, applied science. We have a standard to set with that. And we base trialed I can't remember, well over 200 different varieties of dahlias, the ones that cut flower growers were growing.
Wow.
There's of course, like hundreds of thousands of varieties of dahlias, I think. But there's certain ones that are available in the trade for cut flower growing or super popular on social media or whatever. And the ones that our customers want, the certain colors and shapes. And so we just base trialed the heck out of whatever we could get our hands on of the stuff that was selling through the market. Keeping a standard, we invented, and it's in the book, we invented 4 stages of harvest so that we could communicate with our growers. See, all these things, these systems are so that you can communicate from one grower to another and have a similar result. So we just are and that's why why the book doesn't have an author. It's authored and published by the market, the co-op market, because it's the farmers. This is the collective knowledge of the farmers that the farmers are sharing. Me being one of the farmers and a leader in the project. But it's what we found was, this is so interesting, dahlias are not all the same. They're like people, like some people can work well in hot weather. Some people wilt when it gets over 70 degrees. Like we all have characteristics that are genetic. And so being able to understand, let's see, like brown sugar is a fantastic cutting dahlia. Well, what we did is we created a chart. There's in the book, there's a chart of 5 pages just of dahlias. I think you've got that. You could probably include that in your supplemental materials, some of those samples. But what it is we base tested them. We included in the chart the ones that had the vase life. Some dahlias have a vase life of 2 or 3 days. Some of them have a vase life of 14 days. It's so interesting how all over the map they are. Yeah, and some of them won't budge an inch from when you cut them, and some of them will shatter if you cut them past a fairly tight stage. It's like, and we got that. Not going. Cornell is a great dahlia, but it doesn't want to be cut past stage 2. I mean, it'll shatter on you in 3 days. Well, good to know if you're putting them in grocery bouquets. And so that information becomes just the ability to, the information that you need to be able to have your bouquet last a week or however long you tell your customer it's going to last. And so what we did is we bolded. We have the list and what you whether it can be included in weeklies or just for event purposes, that sort of thing. But then we also bolded the ones, and this is really important for growers, not so much for backyard gardeners, although it does matter. Is that, does it actually pay for its real estate? Does this, I pick on Crichton honey, which hopefully there is a new. I don't grow dahlias anymore, but I did for years. And hopefully there's a new dahlia that's better than Crichton honey people are growing, because it looks really good in photographs and behaves well in a vase, but it'll shoot you 3 stems a week if you're lucky, and a plant if you're very lucky. I mean, this is awful, and it's always short and falling over, and ugh. So then we don't bold that one because find a better one, and then that information goes back to the root producers. It's like, hey, these are the ones. Like I always thought of it like your 24 crayon box. Doesn't mean you can't experiment all over the map, but you really need that solidity to be able to have reliability to your customers, that knowledge. So that would be an example. A very deep answer, but I think it's important. The depth that went into the book. And we're getting a lot of feedback because it's been published for about 6 months now. And what we're getting back from people, it's gotten out there, and the chrysanthemum expert say, you really nailed chrysanthemum. The woman who visits our farm who's a representative for Heuger, who does the ice and roses breeding out of Germany, comes to me and says, I went to her and got the information. We were like, hey, let's be as accurate as possible in here, because there's so much kind of blurry info out there. Washi, it's a romantic industry to get into. We all do it for the passion, and we try to figure out how to make a living after we got ourselves in over our feet. And, so it's like, well, so important to okay, well, here's this information that you need to actually be successful selling these crops, and like hellebores would be another example where our farm has grown Orientalis hellebores for a long time outside, and they're usually a late March, early April crop, and sometimes they get more weather damage than others, but people love them, but you have to wait to a fairly open harvest stage or they just are not reliable. And there's all this information. Poke little pinholes in the stems and do that, put hot water, don't do hot water. There's all this information out there. But the truth is that you have to just wait until a certain harvest stage. This was to your question. Till actually 2 flowers have already gone past their floral stage and then another one's opening, and then you could that's in the book. But the hybrid hellebores, the new ones from Frost Kiss and the Ice and Roses series from Heuger, are they're different, and you can they bloom much earlier. We've got those in our hoop house, and we bring a Valentine's Day crop with those, which is amazing. Wow. And the thing is that they can harvest at a much tighter stage and have reliable base life when you follow the post-harvest care. You have to be. This stuff. I always tell growers, do your own experimenting. Because that's the way you really know. Maybe your water's different. Maybe, who knows growing conditions are different everywhere. But at least this book is, vetted information by growers. So it's got some solidity to it. Any grower will still have to experiment. But it's super good for backyard growers too, and gardeners. And I started out as a passionate gardener. That's where I got my beginnings from. And I always tell the garden clubs that come tour our farm, be careful if you get acreage. Might not be a good thing. Might lose a whole bunch of other aspects of your life in this passion. But it's just this idea that you've got it growing out there, but the difference between whether it lasts 2 days and falls apart on the table or lasts 7 has to do with what stage you harvested at. So that's why that information is so important. And so people who know a lot about plants may not know that piece of information. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And I think you nailed it perfectly at the end there, that a lot of people can grow the flowers and have beautiful flowers, but if you don't harvest them at the right time, they're not going to last afterwards. So, and that's what your book does.
Right. And I also want about quality. It's just that I saw it many times through the years. Some growers know how to use their compost pile and some don't. And it's just really important to know that the florists have a very long memory. So do consumers. It's like if they buy a bouquet from you and it doesn't last, or if they buy some bunches from you and it doesn't hold up, well, it's a perishable industry. It happens to everyone. But if you're as careful as possible for it not to happen, and if you follow up and make sure you do good with those people when it does happen, you will develop a reputation that will take you as long as you want to farm. But if you don't pay attention to that and you sell your garbage because you can't bear to put it on your compost pile, because we all have it, we all have that garbage. It's just, the farms will look the same. It's just the brand of the particular farm will be who has the quality control of what rolls into that truck. Yeah.
I love that advice. That's so great. What else can we find in this book, Floral Standards?
Oh, I think personally, there's just so much to learn. So, well, for one thing, I need to credit Robin Avney, who's our graphic designer. She worked with us and helped us. She's very talented and very experienced, but she's also very practical. And she understood that we needed something like the concept of a cookbook. We needed this book to function for our growers currently in the market to be able to, it's organized. It's a lot of information. So you be organized in a way where it's simple and calm. So, if you're just looking at how many stems of something like Coralopsis is the example I used before, because I just started harvesting that crop here on our farm. And I'm like, I can't remember what the height is on that. I go, look, it's always in generally the same place on the page. So I can go, right, boom, open the book and I see it. Boom, done. Out the door. Or what was that? Was that a crop that needs to be in plain water or hydration solution or a tea bag, and that's explained in the book too, the post-harvest solutions, and different crops need different things. So that for the continuing grower, it's really helpful, but it also has a place called recommended varieties for cutting. And so there's a lot of, the book is an incredible resource for what can I grow to cut? Like if you're in the process of starting or evolving your farm, I do think, and I'm just very passionate about woody crops. I joked with you at the start of this thing that I could talk to you for an hour easy on woody crops. But I do think there's a lot of opportunities of things people have not heard of. And to expand, particularly for people who have land and want to put in more permanent crops, because there's certainly a glut of some of the more common things. And in the summer, it can become almost like a slaughterhouse, like how many marigolds and zinnias can this market bear, and dahlias, you got to find your places, but it's like, oh my goodness, and the price will plummet. And that's so sad because you don't want to be paying money to work that hard. So yeah, I think it's a great resource for what can I grow, and it's also a great resource for backyard gardeners in terms of what can I cut that I didn't know I could cut. Some things just won't put up with going into a vase, but a lot of things will, and it's interesting to note what those are.
Were there any surprises in the book of things that you personally didn't know you could cut?
Oh, there is all the time. I mean, that's all the time. I think the dahlia experiment was a great one. We've got a really good chart on roses too, because, of course, there's, rose trade is massive worldwide, and there are particular varieties of them bred for greenhouse production in particular locations. But people are growing the backyard roses because, I love this movement, and it's just like it's got a second generation on it now from when I started. It's just like it keeps reinventing itself and getting bigger and more enthusiasm. I think it's just a need we have. But like, for instance, what the need is like, when I use that example of the snapdragons or the roses, the same thing. It's like, I want that one that looks like it was cut in the backyard. I don't really actually want that thing that looks like it was grown on steroids. And so then it's like, well, it's different varieties or it's different growing habits. And you just have to figure out how to standardize that enough to get it sold. But like a lot of those David Austin roses, they don't have a great vase life because they're bred for fragrance, but that's what people want. And they have this beautiful arching stem, and they look so gorgeous in arrangements. And of course, there's no lack of creativity amongst the floral community, including the farmer florists. And so it's just lovely to be able to express that creativity. And so that's the variety of different products.
I'm curious on the roses. I've got a personal question on them. Does it talk about, because you mentioned that the book talks about how to proper harvesting. Does it say anything about removing the thorns on the roses and when to do that?
Oh my goodness. It does not say that because, of course, that's a question of what the use is. And so it doesn't affect vase life. But there are thorn removers, and it depends on, I think in our market, a little bit the florists know to shop gingerly, and there's some care taken. I know we grow one variety of roses out here on our farm called Darlow's Enigma. We only grow one variety. It's because it's a shrub rose, and it won't stop growing for us. And it's a fragrant, lovely addition to bridal bouquets in June and July. And that one is it's got thorns even on the leaves. So, and I have a little stripper, and I'll strip the bottom. I try to be considerate, but we farmers have to, get our work done for the day too. And so that doesn't really answer your question.
So there's not a specific standard on whether or not to strip the roses.
No, and if you look in the trade, if you go into any wholesale market, most of them are thorny.
Okay, good to know.
In terms of the traditional wholesale trade, it's the florist's job generally. Doesn't mean has to be that way amongst new growers. But we do have a chart in the book also. We did vase trial, a bunch of the David Austins and Floribundas, and some of the ones that are more commonly grown, those Coco Locos and whatnot. We vase tested them just to see what do they do. So how can you sell them? So which ones you could put in a grocery bouquet, which ones you might be able to ship overnight out of water. We have a shipping section in there, and we tested a lot of things for that. And then just like which ones are like for events only.
This sounds like such a great resource for the floral community. I'm so excited to order my own copy. And it almost sounds like it's kind of like a standard operating procedure that we can also use to give to our employees and those helping us in the field and say, here's exactly, it takes the guesswork out of it for when other people are helping us also.
Oh my God, that is so true. We have a copy that's just out on the table in our barn. And everybody knows to go look it up if they don't remember. Because, people don't always remember that how many stems were in a bunch across the weekend, So yes, absolutely. It's super helpful for labor on the farm as well.
And it's hard because every flower, like you said, is different. So one flower might be a 3-stem bunch, one might be a 5, one might be a 15. And so I think it's so helpful that this is all getting standardized, because it just will make it easier for florists or wholesalers to also buy from local growers. So I just love this.
Oh, thank you. And it's a takeoff point. I mean, it's a reference for, it's set for growing, like a lot of the information is about crops that grow in our particular Northwest region, which translates differently even across the mountains in the same state. But that information, we don't talk about the growing of it so much as the harvesting of it. And so I think it's relevant all over the place. But I would also say it's how our market does it. And we have a disclaimer, not a disclaimer, but a note in the front that just says, hey, it doesn't mean you have to do it this way, but at least you have something you can vary from. Like there's something to start with. And I've talked to people, particularly people forming collectives, are all over it because it's the biggest issue they immediately run into when they're trying to get to selling product together. And of course, we know because we ran into it ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, it's just such a great starting point. I mean, I get so many Instagram DMs from gardeners or newer farmers that are like, am I doing this right? How many stems should I have here? Is this long enough? And so this just takes that guesswork instead of having to ask 10 farmers. You're like, okay, well, some of the biggest growers in the Northwest have already said this is the standard of what they're providing the florists with. So I just love that.
Oh, thank you. And I really want to encourage people to stay creative. Like, if you get a crop and it just doesn't have the stem length, doesn't mean you can't sell it. Just as it might not be the standard height. You might call it a shorty or a tips or, and there's some of that in the book, but, just if it's got quality and it's just a stem length issue, that has to do with whether it matches your customer or not. So remember that this is not the Oxford English Dictionary. This is our attempt at taming enough chaos to be able to make a living doing what we do. And it's certainly a work in progress too. There's a quote in the back of the book that, that's where there's no shortcuts over the Sierra Nevadas. That was my quote.
I love that.
It goes back to my Aunt Annette, right? And they're the pioneer roots. It's, which are of course a mixed bag, but that was certainly people with a lot of tenacity who did that. And it's like, yeah, you just got to sometimes do the actual work, and the actual work might be daunting, but it can be done in steps, one after another. And that's kind of my philosophy is like, okay, we need to deliver a useful and quality product that takes hours and hours and hours of grinding, technical interviewing and spreadsheeting. So be it, which is what is behind this book. And tons of different farmers contributed. So we figure there's the knowledge of over 200 years of knowledge in the book, just from our farmers contributing. Oh, this one works great. That one, don't grow that one. But instead of that just being a conversation at the conference, it's now in the book so everyone can use it,
That's amazing. Such great advice inside that book and so much wisdom you have imparted on us today. I know I'm eager to get a copy, and I'm sure many of our listeners are also. Where can we find Floral Standards?
It's available on the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market website. And I think it's just a drop-down menu, and it's just like purchases or something like that. You drop down and it's just buy the book. And we self-published, and we didn't put it on Amazon because Amazon, we'd be paying money to sell it on Amazon practically the way they charge us. So we self-published, and the book is $79.95, which is a healthy price for a book. But it's because we invested just so many hours and dollars into the production of it that it's actually we're actually offering it at the lowest price we really could afford to. And I think from what I've heard from people who are using it, it's very gratifying. The whole intent was that it be actually helpful to people in farming and cutting flowers. And so I've heard a lot of good feedback already. So just go get it if it sounds like a good thing for you. I don't think you'll regret it.
Well, it's one of those things. It's a resource. You're paying for a resource that you can refer back to time and time again. It's not you're going to read it once and put it on the bookshelf and let it get dusty. It's going to be getting dirty instead out in the field with you.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
So, well, I've got a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this up if that's okay. I'd love to know what excites you the most about the future of flower farming and the local flower movement.
I love that we can keep people tied to the land in all ways. So I like to see it as part of the cornucopia of farming in general. And I think it's utterly critical that as we advance into a more technological world, we also maintain our farming roots and our connection to the planet, because we are, those of us who are at least listening to this podcast, we know of, are not artificial beings. We are humans. And we're biological, and it connects us. So that tying us back to the land and to what we're all made of. It's a very spiritual thing.
It really is. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting their own flower farming journey?
I guess that sense of wonder is what starts you on your first step, right? That oh my God, that thing is called a zinnia and it just opened. That sense of wonder. I would say my best advice is probably to go ahead and like listen and learn and make mistakes and also go ahead and keep going with your own ideas, because you might think that your ideas are normal, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're just how you see the world, and you're unique, just like all those different dahlia varieties are unique, and you probably have something to contribute, and there's probably something that has brought you here. And so just persist. I think persist, but do it intelligently and work with other people. Work to understand that you're part of a bigger industry and you have a part to play, and own that.
That's really beautiful advice, Diane. Thank you so much. It has been such a delight to chat with you. And like you said earlier, I probably could still chat with you for another 3 hours. But I know that we both are in our spring season and it's a busy time of year. So I want to be respectful of your time. Before we say goodbye today, where can our listeners connect with you?
So I have to confess that I got off of social media during COVID and never got back on. And I'm thinking about it, and I may restart Instagram. But meanwhile, just email me off the website. Just hit contact us on the website, and that'll be me who receives that message. And I'm real happy to answer questions that way. And also, the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market has an Instagram feed that's regularly kept up and really interesting. And if you're in the Seattle area and you're interested in engaging with the market in that region, then you can reach out through those channels, through the co-op website.
Thank you. I will include links in today's show notes to all of those so people can stay connected to you. Is there anything I haven't asked you today that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I just appreciate your curiosity. I think that's what binds us together. And it's been a lovely privilege to talk with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Diane. I'd love to keep the door open if you ever want to come back and chat some more flowers with me.
Pretty much any time.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to invite you back on the podcast again. And if anyone listening has anything specific you would like us to ask Diane, please be sure to reach out through the podcast and let me know what you'd like to hear. So I wish everyone a wonderful day, and let's go sow some seeds. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of the Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.